What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and in this video I tend to walk you guys through the full story and the unsolved investigation behind what is not only undoubtedly one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in American history, but what is also one of my favorite unsolved mysteries as well, and that is the story of the man, the myth, the legend, D.B. Cooper. On November 24th, 1971, a man carrying a black briefcase approached a flight counter at Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland International Airport. Paying in cash, the man buys a one-way ticket onto Flight 305 for a 30-minute flight to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. On the ticket, the man lists his name as Dan Cooper. Eyewitnesses described Cooper as being a white man in his mid-40s with dark hair and brown eyes wearing a black business suit. With nothing but his briefcase and a brown paper bag, Cooper boarded Flight 305, which was a Boeing 727-100. With 6 crew members and 37 passengers aboard, Flight 305 departed at 2:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper passed a note to nearby flight attendant Florence Schaffner, who was seated in the jump seat directly behind Cooper. Schaffner simply assumed the note was from a lonely businessman giving out his phone number and stuffed it in her purse without looking at it. Cooper then leaned toward Schaffner and said, "Miss, you better take a look at that note. I have a bomb."
Miss?
Yes, Mr. Cooper?
You might want to take a look at that note. I have a bomb.
Schaffner opened the note, and in it was written, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and I want you to sit by me." Schaffner returned the note, sat down by Cooper, and quietly asked to see the bomb. When Cooper opened his briefcase, Schaffner saw what appeared to be 2 rows of 4 red cylinders, which she assumed to be dynamite. Attached to the red cylinders was a wire leading to a huge cylindrical battery. Cooper told Schaffner his demands as she wrote them down on a piece of paper before bringing the list to the cockpit and informing the flight crew of the situation. Captain William A. Scott told Schaffner to remain in the cockpit during the rest of the flight and to take notes on the situation as it developed. Captain Scott then contacted Northwest Flight Operations in Minnesota and relayed Cooper's demands. Cooper's demands were as follows: 1. $200,000 in cash to be delivered by 5 p.m. 2. 2 sets of front and back parachutes, and 3. for the money to be negotiable American currency. So dollars, he wanted American dollars. Now, by requesting 2 front and 2 back parachutes, Cooper implied that he meant to take a hostage with him whenever he exited the plane. This would discourage authorities from giving Cooper non-functional equipment. With Schaffner in the cockpit, flight attendant Tina Mucklow sat down next to Cooper to act as a liaison between him and the flight crew. Cooper then told Mucklow of his additional list of demands. 1. Once the plane was landed, fuel trucks would meet the plane and all passengers would remain aboard the plane as Mucklow brought the money aboard. 2. Cooper said that he would release the passengers upon receiving the money. And 3. that the last items brought aboard would be the parachutes. Captain Scott informed the Seattle-Tacoma Air Traffic Control Tower of the situation, who then contacted local police and the FBI. Passengers on Flight 305 were told that their arrival would be delayed because of a minor technical difficulty. Meanwhile, Northwest Orient approved the ransom and instructed all of their employees to cooperate with the hijacker and to adhere to his demands. For an estimated 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound, which is a small body of water connecting to the Pacific Ocean. This was done to give the police more time to assemble Cooper's demands and to mobilize emergency personnel. During the flight, Cooper demanded that Mucklow remain by his side, with Mucklow noting that Cooper seemed very familiar with the local terrain. While looking out the window, Cooper said, "It looks like Tacoma down there," and also correctly identified McChord Air Force Base as being only a 20-minute drive from the airport. Mucklow also stated that Cooper, quote, "was never nervous. He seemed rather nice as he was never cruel or nasty." While the plane continued to circle Seattle, Mucklow asked Cooper why he chose Northwest Orient Airlines to hijack. Cooper replied saying, quote, "It's not that I have a grudge against your airline, it's just that I have a grudge." So you knew that this guy was just cool. Cooper then asked where Mucklow was from and even offered her a cigarette, which she accepted despite quitting beforehand. The FBI used several Seattle banks to gather up the ransom for Cooper. Most of the bills that they gathered contained serial numbers beginning with the letter L, suggesting that they were issued by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. The bills were also photographed on microfilm for the FBI. Before landing, Cooper rejected the recommended military parachutes from McChord Air Force Base, instead demanding civilian parachutes with manually operated zip cords. Seattle police obtained 2 front parachutes from a nearby skydiving school and 2 back parachutes from a stunt pilot. At 5:24 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Captain Scott was informed that the parachutes had been delivered to the airport and notified Cooper that they would be landing soon. At 5:36 p.m., Captain Scott landed Flight 305 and parked the plane on a partially lit runway with Cooper's permission. Cooper demanded that only one representative of the airline would meet the plane, and that the money in the parachutes would be delivered to the only entrance to the plane Cooper wanted them to use, which was the plane's front door. Northwest Orient Seattle operations manager was chosen to be the courier, who changed out of his uniform and into civilian clothes for the meet to avoid his uniform being mistaken for that of a cop's. A ground crew attached the stairs to the front door of the plane as the passengers remained seated, and Mucklow exited the plane to receive the money and brought it back onto the plane through curious passengers.
That back there is not real!
Cooper then gave permission for the passengers to disembark Flight 305 while he counted the money. It's here that Mucklow tried to break the tension between her and Cooper by jokingly asking if she could have some of the money. Cooper then agreed and gave Mucklow a stack of the ransom money, which Mucklow denied because accepting gratuities was against company policy. With the passengers safely disembarked, the only people who remained on the plane were Cooper and the 6-person flight crew. Mucklow continued to make 3 more trips out of the plane to retrieve the parachutes, and while Mucklow brought the parachutes aboard, Flight Attendant Alice Hancock asked Cooper if it was okay if the flight attendants could leave. Cooper responded to this by saying, "Whatever you girls would like." So, W-Riz. Both Hancock and Schaffner disembarked the plane while Mucklow brought the final parachute aboard, and with it she gave Cooper a list of instructions on how to use the parachutes, to which Cooper replied saying that he didn't need them. A problem with the plane's refueling process caused a delay, during which Cooper and Mucklow both complained that the money was brought in a flimsy sack, meaning that Cooper had to think of a new way to transport the money. Using a pocket knife, Cooper cut the canopy from one of the parachutes and began stuffing the money in the empty parachute bag. While grounded, an official from the FAA requested a face-to-face meet with Cooper aboard the plane, but Cooper refused. Cooper soon became impatient with the refueling process, saying this shouldn't take this long and let's get this show on the road. Cooper then gave Captain Scott his flight plan and his directives. 1. A southeast route to Mexico City at a speed that was slow but wasn't slow enough to stall the plane, which would have been 100 knots at a 10,000 foot altitude. Cooper also specified when the landing gear was to be deployed, that the wing flaps must remain at 15 degrees, and that the cabin remained unpressurized. Now, in case you haven't picked up on it by now, Cooper seems to say a lot of things that imply that he knows a lot about planes and how they work. Captain William J. that name, told Cooper that these configurations would limit the plane's range to 1,000 miles, meaning that they had to refuel before entering Mexico. After discussing options, Cooper settled on Reno Tahoe International Airport to refuel. Cooper further demanded that the rear door of the plane must remain open during the flight with the stairs extended. The airline responded that this move was unsafe, to which Cooper replied, quote, "It can be done, do it." Cooper then stated that he wouldn't lower the stairs until they were already airborne. Cooper also demanded that Mucklow remain on board to assist in the flight, so Mucklow just couldn't catch a break. At around 7:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Flight 305 took off with only Cooper and a now 4-person crew aboard, including Mucklow. 2 F-106 fighter jets from the McChord Air Force Base, along with a Lockheed T-33 trainer, which had been diverted from an unrelated Air National Guard mission, were ordered to follow Flight 305 to her destination. All jet craft maintained steady S flight patterns so that they could remain directly behind the plane and out of Cooper's view. After takeoff, Cooper instructed Mucklow to lower the stairs to the plane's rear door, to which Mucklow expressed fear to Cooper that she would be sucked out of the plane. Cooper then told Mucklow that he would lower the stairs himself. Cooper then instructed Mucklow and the rest of the flight crew to go into the cockpit, close the curtains separating first class from coach, and to not return. Before she left, Mucklow begged Cooper to take the bomb with him, to which Cooper replied that he would either disarm the bomb or take it with him when he jumped. Before she left, Mucklow observed Cooper tying what appeared to be the money around his waist. For the rest of the flight, Mucklow remained in the cockpit and was the last person to ever see the hijacker. Around 8 o'clock p.m., a warning light shone in the cockpit that the rear door of the plane had been opened. The pilots then used the intercom to ask Cooper if he needed help, to which Cooper replied no. At around 8:13 p.m., the aircraft's tail section suddenly pitched upwards and forced the pilots to regain control of the plane over Portland neighborhoods. With the rear door open and the staircase deployed, the flight crew remained in the cockpit, unsure if Cooper was still on board. As the plane approached Reno, Mucklow came over the intercom and asked Cooper to close the rear door of the plane and to raise the staircase as they were about to land, but she got no reply. At 11:02 p.m., with the plane's rear door open and the staircase still extended, Flight 305 landed at Reno Tahoe International Airport. FBI agents, state troopers, Reno's local police, and sheriff's deputies set up a perimeter around the flight, but didn't approach even after it was stopped, fearing that Cooper was still on board with the bomb. Captain Scott searched the plane, confirming that Cooper was no longer on board, and after an extensive 30-minute search, the FBI finally declared the plane safe. And now that the story is out of the way, we are getting into the investigation. Along with 66 fingerprints belonging to Cooper that were found aboard the plane, the police also interviewed eyewitnesses from both Portland and Seattle and compiled a series of composite sketches. The FBI and the local police immediately started interviewing and questioning possible suspects. Acting on the assumption that Cooper had used his real name, or at least the alias of another crime, the Portland Police Department interviewed a man by the name of D.B. Cooper. Portland's Cooper had like a little bit of a criminal background, but he was immediately ruled out as a suspect. But in a rush to meet a deadline, a reporter by the name of James Long confused the Portland Cooper for the actual hijacker. United Press International's wire service repeated James Long's error, and as more media outlets began to cover it and began to make the same mistake, Cooper's pseudonym soon became D.B. Cooper. Because of different estimations on Flight 305's speed, along with the fact that environmental conditions varied along the flight path, finding the precise landing area to search became difficult. Cooper is also the only person who could know for sure how long he stayed in free fall before opening his parachute. And remember those F-106 fighter jets that were tailing the plane? Yeah, well, the pilots of those jets didn't see him jump, and their radar also didn't pick up on the opening of any parachute. And also, a man wearing a black business suit jumping out of the plane in like the middle of the night would generally be kind of hard to spot. On December 6, 1971, the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover authorized use of an Air Force SR-71 Black Hawk to retrace the flight path of Flight 305. The Black Hawk's mission was to photograph the ground from the air in an attempt to find items that belonged to Cooper at the time that he would have jumped out of the plane. But despite the extensive photograph effort, nothing ever came of it. Initial extrapolations placed Cooper's landing zone within an area just south of Mount St. Helens, which was a few miles southeast of Ariel, Washington. Search parties launched a search, that's a mouthful, focusing on Clark County and Cowlitz County, with the police and the FBI conducting large searches of heavily wooded terrain on foot and by helicopter. Police conducted searches going door to door into different farmhouses, and other search parties patrolled by boat at Lake Merwin and Yale Lake. Despite the search campaign, though, neither Cooper nor anything he had brought with him was ever found. While police searched the entire flight path of Flight 305 and submarines combed the floors of Lake Merwin, two women stumbled upon a skeleton in an abandoned building somewhere in Clark County. The skeleton was identified as that of Barbara Ann Derry, a teenage girl who had been abducted several weeks before, and nothing belonging to Cooper was ever found. A month after the hijacking, the FBI released serial number lists containing the serial numbers of the bills used in the ransom money. These lists were primarily handed down to financial institutions, banks, casinos, racetracks, and other businesses that routinely dealt in large cash transactions. Northwest Orient Airlines issued a public reward for as little as 15% of the ransom money. It was said that sometime after this, that two men used counterfeit $20 bills with the ransom number serial numbers on them in an attempt to swindle a Newsweek reporter for what he thought would be an interview with the man that they claimed the hijacker was. And no, the whole thing was a hoax, so don't even worry about that. Later analysis of 305's flight path indicated that Cooper's landing zone was way farther east than originally thought. It's also suspected that the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens could have destroyed any potential evidence left from Cooper. On February the 10th of 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family at a beachfront known as Tina Bar, about 9 miles from Vancouver, Washington. As Brian raked at the sand to build a sandcastle, he uncovered 3 packets of the ransom money, totaling to around $5,800. FBI technicians confirmed that the money was a part of the ransom, which were 2 packets of $120 bills each, and a third packet of 90, all arranged as was when given to Cooper. But the discovery of the ransom money seemed to raise more questions than it did answers. The leading theory was that the money had been washed down shore and washed up on the beach instead of having been deliberately buried there. This theory was based on the amount of exposure to the elements that the bills had gone through. But when you really break it down, it is easy to be able to poke holes in the whole free-floating hypothesis for the money. Number 1, where did the missing 10 bills go? Number 2, how did the bills stay together after separating from the rest of the money? And number 3, it was said that it should have taken the money a couple years after the hijacking to wash up on the beach. In 1986, after long negotiations, the money was split evenly between Brian Ingram and Northwest Orient Airlines insurer, Royal Globe Insurers. The Columbia River ransom money remains to this day the only physical evidence found outside of the aircraft. Now, it wouldn't be a DB Cooper video without me bringing this up, but from the beginning of the investigation, the FBI remained extremely skeptical of Cooper's chances of surviving the jump. The FBI presented different reasons and facts to this, which include things like Cooper's apparent lack of skydiving experience, Cooper's apparent unfamiliarity with parachutes, his lack of proper gear for the jump and survival, the inclement weather at the time of the hijacking, the wooded terrain that he jumped into, his lack of knowledge about his landing terrain, and the unused ransom money. But some theorists claim that the brown paper bag that I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Cooper brought onto the plane actually contained gear that he needed for the jump and for survival after the hijacking, and this theory was backed up by eyewitness accounts who said that during the entirety of the flight, Cooper never used anything from or even opened the brown paper bag. Cooper also did not seem to have someone waiting for him on the ground, as this would require a perfectly timed jump and the flight crew's cooperation with a specific flight path. Finally, that the ransom money remains unfound, and the recovered money was found unspent. FBI agent Richard Tosaw, and no, that's his real name, theorized that Cooper became incapacitated from hypothermia during the jump, fell into the Columbia River, and drowned. And no, I refuse to believe that on the basis that it's not cool. In the months following the hijacking, however, 5 copycat hijackings similar to DB Cooper have taken place, with all of them surviving the parachute jumps, forcing the FBI to seriously reconsider what they thought about Cooper's survival chances. On April 23, 2013, Earl J. Crossey, who packed the parachutes that were given to Cooper, was found dead in his home in Washington. His death was ruled to be from blunt force trauma to the head, and the culprit remains unknown. But to be fair, it said that burglary was the most likely motive for the crime, so maybe. I just thought it was kind of weird. On July 8, 2016, the FBI suspended the investigation into the DB Cooper case, wanting to spend more resources and money on more pressing matters. The 66-volume case file, compiled over the course of the 45-year investigation, has since been made available to the public. The mysterious hijacking of Flight 305 to this day remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in aviation history. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe. It really does mean the most. And this is Cryptic, signing off.